My first question has to do with this notion I've heard you talk about a couple times about if you're going 100 miles an hour and you hit a tree, it's a lot worse than if your energy is moving slowly. And also, I think I heard you once...
We don't say so much that it's worse. We say it's a bigger mess.
Okay. And I think I heard you once say, and maybe I got this wrong, that if you are deliberately creating more than you are allowing, that's what causes illness. I'm interested in the context of illness.
Well, we would call it imbalance. In other words, energy alignment. The ideal situation is to let the details of your life spur the next idea of what you would like. And then your expectation of well-being to be in such a place that almost as quickly as you identify that you would like it, that you allow it. So there's very little gap between, oh, what a good idea, and yes, I see that I like this. Oh, what a good idea. And yes, I see that I like that. In other words, the relationship between the vibration of your desire and the vibration of your allowing, which is the believing or letting it in factor, that relationship is the relationship about how you feel. And how you feel is about everything that happens to you. So, if you really, really want something, if you have been exposed to criteria that has helped you to identify that you really, really want something, and then something happens that you are not believing that you can live it or have it, there is a strong tug of war going on within you. That's a contradiction of energy. And under those conditions, that state of vibration is equivalent to many illnesses. In fact, when you start paying attention to the way you feel, in the same way that you can feel emotional set points, you might say, well, I usually feel pretty happy, or I usually feel pretty ornery, or I usually feel optimistic, or I usually feel pessimistic, or I usually feel lonely. As you pay attention to the way you feel, and as you watch others and the way they seem to be feeling, you'll begin to notice that headaches are more of a vibrational match to someone who's often frustrated and overwhelmed, while heart attacks are more of a vibrational match to someone who feels strong stress. Or when you really, really want something that you don't believe you can have, when you've worked in an organization that you really care about, and then the government does something that makes you feel powerless, that kind of desire and belief that you can't control is a vibrational match to the stroke or the heart attack. There are books that have been written where they actually begin to assign emotions to different labels of illness. And the reason that they are sort of effective, not always, in doing that is because as they watch people and they watch what they turn up with in terms of illness, they are able to begin to make associations between how those people are usually feeling. And so, rather than waiting for the post-manifestational evidence of the illness, we think the pre-manifestational evidence of the emotion is very helpful. In other words, when you get a handle of how you feel and you care about how you feel and you notice you're not feeling that good and you're determined to think thoughts that feel better, then you can head illness off because you begin moving up the emotional scale. And the gap between where you are and where you want to be closes. There's 3 steps for the creative process. Our step 1, ask for it. Well, you can't help but do that. Your life experience is causing that to happen subliminally. It's happening unconsciously. It's happening whether you speak about it or not. It's happening cellularly, and it's happening consciously. In other words, it's happening on all levels of your being. So your future experience is full of all of this stuff that the universe has lined up for you. Stuff that's all lined up and prepared for you, just waiting for you to do step 3, which is get into vibrational alignment with your own desire. So if you have piles of stuff out there in vibrational escrow that you keep reminding yourself that you want, but you keep beating the drum of I don't have it, where is it? Then the stress factor or the distance between this active desire that is yours and your ability to let it in is gonna make you sick. And someone would say, well, ignorance is bliss. I felt a lot better before I was stimulated to any of that desire. And we said, yeah, you probably did, but you can't go back. You cannot want less than your time-space reality has inspired you to want. So if we really wanted something that we didn't believe, we'd try to play it down a little. We'd try to deactivate that. But more importantly, we would work on moving ourselves emotionally, vibrationally closer to it. And that's why we use that analogy of the trees. We say, if you're going 100 miles an hour and you hit a tree, It's the tree that's a problem, not your speed. Trying to slow the car down so that you can weave through the trees without scraping yourself up is a boring, slow life that you cannot retrograde to. You can't go back. You can't go back. You cannot be less than you are, and you cannot want less than you've come to want. You cannot become less than you have become. And when we say you're out here on the leading edge, we're not kidding you. In other words, your exposure to this new, unique nitty-gritty is causing an expansion of the universe. And the universe is demanding a fulfillment of what you have identified as desire. So it's not just your desire. Now universal forces are in on it too, you see. So when you get something rolling, it begins to grow, and it's encoded with your DNA. In other words, it's got your name on it. It's yours. It must be yours if you are ever to truly be satisfied again. You cannot create something out here in the vibrational universal ethers and ever be joyful in the unfulfillment of it. It's not supposed to be that way. You're supposed to be the receiver of what you have created. And that's the imbalance that takes place, you see. That was good.
When I first started practicing this, and it was actually before I even heard about Abraham, I found a book called Psycho-Cybernetics that said you could train your subconscious mind to believe something, and then your conscious mind would make it happen. So I started doing it every night. I'd write down, I wanted $100,000 a year by the time I was 30. This was 15 years ago. I said, if you put the emotion behind it, it comes faster. And I started getting $15,000 raises and $15,000 bonuses every year. And I hit my goal, and I was like, wow, this is great. So then I tried it with some other things. I found my husband that way. Then I started thinking it has to do more with the energy. And then I found your tapes. I thought, oh, this is great. So I thought, well, maybe, I don't know what I really want, but maybe, how about $150,000 this year? So I thought, that's what I'm going to go for, $150,000 this year. And my husband, now husband, we were dating 3 months at the time, and I were driving down the road, and he was very nervous about the way I drove, because I drive kind of fast. So I had slowed down, and we got run over by a semi-truck, literally run over. We walked away. We were lined up enough to walk away. The first offer for settlement, $150,000. And I think it was all the things that we wanted that got us there, but maybe it was the disconnect between what I wanted and how I was going to get it that caused me to ignore that little voice in my head. And I even verbalized it right before the accident. It said, this lane isn't safe. And I said to my husband, this lane isn't safe. And he said, well, why don't you move? And I said, well, I don't know.
Because I'm fighting with you. Because I moved here in negative response to your criticism about my driving, and I am not tapped into my guidance system.
Yeah, I wasn't listening at that point as much as I am now.
Well, anything that you want will find a way to you. And what we want to comment on here is, if getting run over by a big truck is the path of least resistance, then so be it.
God, I hope not.
And as you say, no big deal, we walked away, so there must not have been all that much resistance in it, you see. But you're helping us to define something here, and that is the relationship between where I am and what I want is where all of the work is. And we're just wanting to simplify it. There are all kinds of things that you can read. People talk about this unconscious or subconscious mind, and we say, well, first of all, let us say to you clearly that if you've got something going on subconsciously, then you're not having emotional response to it. And if you're not having emotional response to it, then it's not a big vibrational factor in your point of attraction, so it doesn't matter. And if you are having emotional response to it, and therefore it is a big player in your vibrational point of attraction, then it's not unconscious. In other words, if you're having an emotional response to it, it matters enough to pay attention to what you're giving your attention to and see if you can't adjust the way you feel. And so we want you to just begin consciously utilizing your guidance system. And when you do that, you'll discover that there is the potential for relief no matter where you stand. And we really want to say that to you, because you could be in a place of depression, and when you find anger, you're going to feel relief. And you could be in a place of anger, and when you find frustration, you're going to feel relief. And you could be in a place of frustration, and when you find hope, you're going to feel relief. You could be in a place of hope, and when you find belief, you're going to feel relief. But even in these upper registries of love and appreciation and joy and ecstasy and passion, there is still the potential for releasing more resistance. So what happens is your life experience, as you begin vibrating more consistently here, gives you more unique data that takes you into more and more refined desires. And it isn't until you really decide and mean sincerely, I'm no longer going to factor anybody else's desires into my feeling quotient. I'm no longer going to try to compare myself and how I feel and what I've got to how anybody else feels and what they've got. This is strictly, does this feel better than this? 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 And when you show yourself that relief factor, and when you consciously acknowledge that the relief factor is dovetailing to the focus factor, and that the focus factor is about choosing something based upon how it feels, and that in that effort you reconnect again and again with the stream that is really you, now you can stand in almost any situation and still feel secure, which means no stepping into any situation could ever take you the wrong way on your emotional scale. And then you're eager to get out there in the world. We watch so many of you who, through action, try to improve your situation. And then you find yourself in a more comfortable place in terms of environment than you were before. But now you're afraid to move around because there is only so much control you have over conditions. Where when you show yourself that the way you feel is about your choice of focus, now you feel invincible. Now you feel adventurous. Now you're not afraid to go anywhere because you understand that you are a centered, blessed creature of well-being who can move about for stimulation and adventure without being in jeopardy. That's what the leading edge of thought feels like. Jerry and Esther have a dear friend who's also a counselor and been using Abraham materials for years in counseling her clients. And she told Esther recently that she has a new phrase that she's offering. She tells her clients who are complaining about an ugly world or complaining about an out-of-control world, who are feeling out of control because of terrorism or out of control because of alcoholic children or whatever. She tells them, just find the eye of your hurricane and stay there. And Esther said, I really like that sentiment, because in the eye of the hurricane there is this calm. In other words, anyone who's lived through one lived through the outer wall, and then they had this time when it seemed like nothing was going on, and then as the hurricane moved on, it was disruptive again. And if they could have just moved with the eye, they could have eternally been in this place of well-being, even though chaos may be going on all around them. And so we want you to make a decision that you can control the way you focus, and that you do it not by achieving control of factors, but by wanting so much to feel good that you focus upon what does feel good. And the sentiment is not, I'm going to follow my bliss, or I'm going to find the best feeling thought I've ever found. The sentiment is, I'm going to reach for the best feeling thought that I have access to right now on this subject. Not changing the subject, because that just leaves that vibration where it is, and the door will turn up in your next motor coach, and your next one, and your next one, and your next one. Or this characteristic that is horrible will show up in every mate. I'm on my 12th husband, and they've all done this exact same thing. Or they treat me this way at every hotel, or they treat me this way at every restaurant, or it's always like this, traffic's like this everywhere. And we say, no, it isn't, just when you're there. In other words, it is your vibration that is summoning these, and you can summon behavior from people who have never before offered that behavior. You can get so expectant of something that they'll give it to you, and they'll say, whoa, what was that? I've never said that before. I've never spit in anyone's food before. What came over me?
That's very good. Thank you.
Yes, indeed.